your boy Ancient Albatross here again, joining from the astral plane. But tonight we got some exciting stuff. But as usual, we have our CU boys, Spigs18 and Alpha Dean, or just Dean. And just as a quick reminder, if you haven't already, be sure to follow us here on Twitch or subscribe to us over on YouTube. It helps us out quite a bit. But Anthony, what are we doing here tonight?
Today we're doing a walkthrough. We haven't done a walkthrough in quite a while. I'm excited for this. We decided on First Responders by Bruce Cordell and Shanna Germain. This is actually one of the newer MCG products, so this is going to be really cool and interesting. I'm really excited to get this started. So Dean, why don't you start us off with what is the First Responders about, and maybe read us the excerpt.
A fire roars through an apartment building. Rescuers struggle through surging flames to reach stranded families, but meanwhile, sparks drift over the nearby gas station. A train derailment has toppled, and a truckload of nuclear waste exposing trapped passengers to the dangerous radiation. But reaching them risks shifting the wreckage and spilling even more. A grumbling volcano threatens the efforts of rescue lost hikers. When the lava begins to flow, whole towns are suddenly at risk. Floods, pandemics, earthquakes, and other crises that have put lives and communities at risk. These are monsters of a different sort. They call for a different kind of hero. First Responders puts a new spin on the adventure gaming, introducing systems for mega challenges that let you take on disasters of all sorts. First Responders gives you new rules and guidelines for adventure-sized disaster scenarios, roster-style parties to run multiple characters with different areas of expertise over the course of the campaign, new character options, including responder types and loads of disaster-related gear, half a dozen scenarios, adventure-length disasters that pit your team against terrible odds, plus everything you need to create your own. Easy portability to Numenera and other Cypher Systems games. Incorporate natural man-made or supernatural mega challenges into any Cypher game. First Responders, guys, it's an awesome book, and it does deliver on everything I just read.
Yeah, this is going to be an exciting walkthrough, because I think that, my first pass of this book, before we even get into it, right? My first pass of this book, I think I like skimmed through it, and it was like, oh, this is cool. This is D20 Modern for Cypher, but it's so much more than that. And we'll as we'll start walking through like each chapter, we'll definitely touch on why I feel that way. But yeah, it's very much more than D20 Modern. It does have some D20 Modern elements that you can incorporate into any Cypher System game, but it is much more than that. This is a book packed full of not only great information, but so many adventure ideas.
Absolutely agree, 1000%. The fact that when we were talking about it early on and you compared it to D20 Modern, I was like in the same boat. And like you said, after you imbibe the book, really you realize that it can't just be D20 Modern. There is much more to it because it's Cypher System, because Cypher System adds a lot of modularity to your games as well. So
the first thing that's eye-catching is the layout and the artwork. Like, look at this cover art right here. I mean, the first chapter art right here. This is awesome. This looks, it's an adventure scene all in itself. It gives you so many ideas of what to do, but we'll go into the introduction, because like every other MCG book, they always write a nice introduction to to lead you to what the book is going to be about. This one is no different. This one was written by Shanna Germain, who we should say from the very beginning was an actual firefighter for quite a few years. So not only was this, not only is she's given us actual experience from having a job as a first responder, right off the jump that there's going to be a love in this project because she was one of them.
Right. And another thing that speaks out about it, like you said, right in the intro and everything too, is that there was such care taken to be respectful and to try to encompass all the different types of first responders out there, and to give you a perspective, because you know, they are a very special group of people, whether it's, you know, medical first responders, disaster first responders, you know, first responders in general are people who are a little bit bigger than life. They are like, you know, modern real life superheroes, if you will, with the things that they're willing to do, the way they push their bodies, the risks that they're willing to take. And this is all encompassed and encapsulated within the pages of first responders.
I mean, you phrased it the best, Dean, when you said real world superheroes, because that's exactly what they are. You know, not many of us could say that we put our lives on the line for others every day at work. So, you know, so
Exactly.
right there, you know, they are the modern day real world superheroes in my eyes.
Exactly.
So,
So, and
you
I'm,
know,
go ahead. Go
no, I
ahead.
was gonna say before we, you know, like start walking through the book, when you first purchased this, right, and Chad could chime in as well, right? But when you first purchased this, what were you essentially looking for? Were you imagining that, you know, you want to run games playing firefighters, paramedics, police officers, or were you looking for something else? I'm just curious.
Well, for me, it's kind of interesting. I got it, like we said before, I kind of got everything I was looking for and more. I was hoping for a book that would open my eyes to being able to give the real world person, you know, I mean, there are games that you don't want an adept in, you know, just because of the nature of it. It's really hard to have to kind of translate some of their abilities into mundane things if you're trying to run a modern type game. This gave a lot of directions and a lot of ways to reskin that whole idea, and not just, and this is the more part, because it gave you the insight or the view of how you would manipulate all the characters to become something more, I don't want to use the word mundane, but more real world. Whereas then, you know, there's the aspect of, you know, being firefighters, being, you know, disaster experts and so on and so forth. That just added a whole new dynamic. That was something I really did not think I was going to embrace. So yeah, I got more than I expected because I really embrace it. I really want to run, you know, some disaster games because so many of the ideas and mechanics in here are brilliant.
I bought something good in chat. He basically said he wanted to, the natural disaster stuff is what excited him the most. What I was curious, my first impression, like I said earlier, my first impression was, you know, I always view any of these setting books as what I could rip from them for my personal games and for my one shots outside of the setting. So my first thought was, oh, this is great. This is going to give me the stat blocks for creating, for lack of a better term, you know, normal professions and characters like firefighters, you know, police officers, stuff like that, like a better idea of how to craft them on the fly. And then I wanted to see, because when this was first advertised on the Kickstarter, they mentioned a lot about adding mechanics to actual natural disasters. Like, how do I figure out mechanically what a volcano affects the players in a party? What, you know, what a house fire does. So I was curious to see how they were going to cypherize that, if that makes any sense. And I think both those questions get answered rather quickly in this book. But that's what my initial thoughts were when I heard about this project.
Yeah, but we kind of were on the same sheet of music. So let's jump right in, man.
Chapter 1.
What is First Responders game? You know, and you know, like they say from the beginning, it's an RPG, it's a role-playing game. You know, but again, it's, you know, you're not putting on your super suit, you're putting on your fire suit. You know, you're not putting on, you know, your utility belt, you're putting on, you know, a tool belt, you know. And it just goes on to talk about how it's based around the whole idea of EMTs and volunteer firefighters and, you know, first responders of all sorts, and how you're going to react or be used throughout a disaster or calamity type situation within your game. It really expands upon the idea of being able to do that as part of any game.
Al, could you scroll the chapter down?
Yeah, and basically, like I said, it
it basically breaks down what emergency service is for those that may not know. And like every other introduction in all the other Cypher System books, it lays out, in pretty layman's terms, what exactly is going to be in this book. I think for the most part, most of us know what a role-playing game is and what a Cypher System game is. So it highlights like what's the new stuff that's going to be in this book without actually breaking it down. Like disaster mode and how healing is going to work, consent and stuff like that. But it doesn't really start getting into the nitty gritty until we get to chapter 2.
How to play. And this chapter is really good because it breaks down how you want to play. Like, for example, they have one where it says it's SU realism, and so that means we're trying to recreate the tension in those cinematic moments in those great disaster movies. But if you think about those great disaster movies, those movies do eschew a lot of realism. Any movie you watch, any disaster film you watch, the hero does something that's a little beyond human and or just is, not possible, but it works on the screen. And that's what this chapter talks about. It talks about the science and physics of it all.
This chapter is very important because let's be realistic here. This isn't a topic that is in most RPGs. We're dealing in especially if we're being true to the book and using the book as written, and everyone is playing emergency service, emergency response team members, right? This game is going to be based heavily on realism. So you're not using the same GMing techniques that you would normally use in, say, a fantasy game or a sci-fi game, because these games are really grounded, in real world, not only physics, just real world technology. Your scene setups are more straight and direct to the point. And this is an advice it's advice and ways of telling you how to set up your game so it's more on the realistic side. So you actually have to explain things better.
Yes, it does, but it doesn't, because there's even a blurb right here on page 9, page 11 on the PDF for those of you, right at the top. It says, unlike many games where the world is completely made up and no one knows anything, that's okay. We might feel pressure in a real world game to know things. We might think I should know how to fight a fire, or I need to know exactly how to set a broken leg. Let that go. This too is make-believe. So there are, like I said, there are those methods that you do it cinematically versus doing it technically.
I wasn't implying that someone had to know how to set a broken.
No, I wasn't saying you were.
I wasn't
saying you were. I was saying that the game, right, that's what I'm saying. The game talks about that. So yeah. it's like we were saying, it's like twofold, because part of it is getting the connection to give it the realism, but in the same breath, it's still a fantasy. That's all.
Well, what I meant is setting it up narratively in a game that's based on real world, not necessarily knowing the real world. And that's the advice she was giving earlier in the section. How to
right, but no, it said, that's what I'm saying. This whole chapter is about, which we're both saying it, but I think it's two halves of the whole. She does talk about setting it up in a real world manner, but but it's also saying how you have to eschew realism. If you understand, eschew means, kind of push it outward, or push it to the side, because that's what the whole point of it is to give you the cinematic ideology and not so much the truly hardcore reality of it. Because I don't think anybody wants to play that, you know.
This is the first part of the book where they actually bring up the action plan. The action plan is a like, I wouldn't call it a mechanic, but it's a way of thinking that your players should take into account. It's basically when you arrive onto a scene of an emergency, it's assessing the scene, it's setting an objective, and you could accumulate XP by either accomplishing those objectives or adding to, adjusting the plan to for whatever disaster scenario you're working with.
You know what this reminds me of?
Mm.
Blades in the Dark?
Yeah.
The planning session, when you set up to do your heist or whatever, it gives me that kind of feeling, which is, wow. This is something we're going to encounter in another Mighty Cook game, but we'll talk about that later. But that's just hit me, something from Gen Con. But yeah.
And like with every other MCG product, you could easily take this same formula and add it to any of the MCG games. You can add it to a horror game. You could definitely add it to a superhero game. Like,
right.
Have a goal for your super team in the beginning of the game and award additional XP if they accomplish portions of that goal.
Right. Yep. This is it's really solid, when you think about it. And it just amazes me how you'll see shades of things, how it progresses, or you can see the backward compatibility.
Then they go into breaking down all the verbiage that rescue team people that use that and actually attach like actual actions to that verbiage, like stuff that me personally, I would, I wouldn't have known the definition. I mean, I knew what suppress was, but not what the definition of suppress was in terms to a firefighter. So it like breaks it down, so it gives you the verbiage, not only as the GM, but also be helpful for the players to read this, because her and Bruce attach actions to these verbiage. So it'll be like similar to someone saying, hey, I'm gonna hide for cover, in a D&D game or in a fantasy game, you know what they mean. But so this is actually very helpful too as well.
The reality of it is that what's so cool about it, like you said, they attach an action to it, but in the same breath, you can kind of look at it on the other side of the coin. They turn the disaster item into an actual NPC that you have to react to and attempt to use these different abilities on. It is really cool because it brings an anonymity and it brings a gravitas to doing these situational, epic type of disaster. I mean, it's like you can do the Towering Inferno now, or you can do the Poseidon Adventure or Titanic or whatever. It gives that aspect to making, like how you watch those movies and the water's trickling in and it's slowly rising. So now you can add that tension because now guess what? This is something that the players can respond to through a game mechanic.
The verbiage?
Yes, the verbiage, like suppress and detect and contain and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It now becomes an interactive, it becomes interactive to an interactive mechanic that supports the narrative. So,
Al and Chavo, yeah, those words.
You know what? Forget you, Al. I'm sorry. I know a few words.
This next part is really interesting. I love this concept. I don't know if it's been used before in an MCG thing, but I know we've used it before, especially in lethal games. But the concept of a roster system, that's where before the game begins, you have 2 or 3 characters. And according to what the scenario is, we used it in the case of character death. But the way it's used in this game is if you're playing a reoccurring, advanced, what you call it, a rescue team, right? You have 3 or 4 different characters that you have, and depending on what the disaster situation is, you could then decide what character you're using. And I think that's, ingenious, and it's really smart.
Right. I mean, it's just so cool because you literally can build an entire disaster team and then change its configuration, which is pretty awesome,
And this is also cool too if you only have 3 or 2 players.
But
if they all have 3 or 4 characters in their sheet, and the GM doesn't tell them what the disaster is, and then they'll be like, "Oh, okay, this is a fire. I'm using this character."
Right. That's what I mean. You could have, one guy's got the firefighter, another one's got a demolitions person, and then you also have a geologist,
Paramedic.
You could have everybody got 3 different types, and it's like every time you put using the roster system, it's like every time you pull the game out. And this could be a cool way to do a campaign as well, because you think about it, you could do a series of disasters, but the team configuration always shifts, to deal with the disaster.
Kind of reminds me of G.I. Joe.
That's what oh my God, you could do an awesome G.I. Joe game with this.
Also, too, it's great too if you come across with death, because you don't have time to make another character. You already have 2 or 3.
Let's talk about one interesting thing about this system too, so everyone knows. This particular book is a supplement onto itself. It has its own unique character type within it. Only one character type, and they only go to tier 3. But it's
we'll get to that when we get to that section.
Well, okay.
That's what the walkthrough is about. We're walking through.
All right. Well, we'll pick up where you want to pick up. Creating your character.
Knowing is half the battle. The last part of this section, they deal with death, because that's what we were talking about a few minutes earlier. They're dealing with and they also deal with gallows humor. Gallows humor is basically, this happens a lot with people in the military or people in emergency response. Your first reaction is with grave situations, you tend to deal with it in humor, and that may happen a lot in this game, because there is going to be some dark and dangerous things that players and characters, and they just tell you to be wary of, gallows humor might not be appropriate in certain circles.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's just like you said, and you just have to be kind of careful how you allow that in your game. One thing you have to remember is, and it even states it in the book somewhere, that gallows humor is not cruel or discriminatory or derogatory. It's never like a situation where the person who's using gallows humor is going to go walk up to someone's loved one and make a joke about death, even though he might joke about death all the time, but he would never do it directly. It's not cruel, it's not inhumane or anything like that. It's just it's a response, it's a response to difficult situations.
Dean, now we get to the chapter that you want to talk about.
Creating your character. It wasn't so much I was just getting to the point that I believe the reason why it only goes to 3 tiers is because you have the multiple characters, and the nature of disasters is once you start going above a certain level with the disaster, I don't think it's really necessary. That's where you start to move into the supernatural, and you're going to want those characters and things that are beyond to come into play. So I can kind of see first responders as being my my introductory to things in Cypher, and playing some real world stuff, recreating, those TV shows like, 911 or Chicago Fire or whatever all those shows are, Grey's Anatomy, you could recreate those, but then once you hit tier 3 going into tier 4, you know, you can transition and become even more fanciful. I think.
Yeah. First off, this is the chapter where you build your character, right? They're gonna tell you everything how to do, how to build a character. They're gonna explain how to put crews together. They're gonna, you know, we don't want to like do a deep dive, but it basically tells you how you're gonna need specific skills for different characters. And like what Dean said earlier, they use one character type, but that character type is so flexible that the character type is called responder. But within responder, you get so many different choices that you could essentially build every emergency service type of character off of this one type, right? Of course, you don't have to use this type if you don't want to. You could still pick any of the types on the regular CSR. It's just that these types, the way it's designed, it's a lot easier for you to pick to create one of the emergency response team members by using this type, because it pretty much covers all the bases.
And another thing with using this type, I think Anthony kind of touches it too. Yeah, using any character type from the CSR or whatever, you know, Cypher game you're playing. But I think this kind of gives you a different type of feeling, you know, when you play the responder types, and the fact that it is so flexible because there's so many different ideas and talents, you know, there, and the fact that they do give you examples of multiple types built from this, you know, multiple flavors, if you will, built from this one type. It's amazing.
They also it's also worth mentioning that they add a bunch of new words you could use for your skills. You know, remember how we always spoke about how, you know, the actual words used in skills is very open to interpretation. Well, they add a bunch of words that wasn't in the CSR in case so you could carry these skills to any game, you know, but they add stuff like hydrology, rescuing, which is a good one. You know, I would have never thought containing, carpentry. They added assessment. They added a bunch of new skills that weren't in any of the other books, but that doesn't mean that it's only, you know, you only have to use it at first responders. It pretty much works in any Cypher game.
Right. And, you know, then they move on to talk about descriptors. There are no new descriptors in this particular book, but they talk about how the descriptors will also help shape and formulate the idea behind the character you want to create. You know, saying how a kind medic is going to deal with situations very differently than a learned medic versus a skeptical medic.
Oh, Dean,
You know?
before you go into the descriptor though, can we go back to the first responder type, because there's a couple of things that are unique to this type that aren't in any other type, and I think we should talk about those.
Okay, good. Bring them up.
All right. The first thing that comes up to mind is that this is the first type that actually gives you a daily changing flex skill, which you basically at the beginning of each day you could choose a new task, and you become trained in that. Which is it's funny, which is the idea we've been messing around with for another game, but it's basically, and that comes from no matter what version of the first responder type you're choosing, you get that ability off the jump. So that's one thing that's entirely different from the warrior, the adept, that's not in any of those types, that's truly unique to the responder, right? And the special abilities, like all the other types, you're allowed 4, but this is one of the few that actually has basically all the knowledge skills that you want, you know, broken down for basically speed, intellect, and might. You could pick skills for each of these if you wanted to as one of your abilities, which is also unique, I think, only to the responder, unless I'm missing one of the other ones, right? Am I missing one of those?
Oh, yeah, and the helper. you know, where it's like it's not part of a focus or anything. It's built right into the type, basically trained in interaction skills
Mm.
to help your as an asset, put it that
Yep.
way. Built
And
in
the
asset.
other thing that's unique to this one as well is, I don't know if they changed it, but this is the only type as well that allows you to choose where your edge goes to.
Right.
You actually have the option to choose to any 3 of the pools. Might, intellect, or, which is unlike any of the other types in the CSR.
Yeah.
That's all I wanted to bring up.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, because I think those are actually unique to this type.
Yeah,
And of
so,
course, they have a bunch of different abilities that you could pick from to to pick whatever style of character you want to play. But essentially, those are the unique stuff that you get at tier 1 that you don't get with any of the other types in the CSR.
yeah. It's really cool. It's really cool. So, of course, like I said, it only goes up to tier 3. And I already spoke about the descriptors. You want to say anything about descriptors, Ant?
I mean, pretty much you can use any of the descriptors from any of the games because just because you're a firefighter doesn't mean that you can't be impulsive or smart or learned. And I think they recognize that. So there really wasn't a need to add the descriptors. It might have been cool to throw 1 or 2 in there, but I don't think it's a big drawback that there isn't any.
Well, like I said, they threw them in. What they did was they just gave examples of using them under the descriptor section, which made sense to me, like I was saying earlier. Learned medic versus skeptical medic versus a calm medic. They're all going to be different, and I think that's kind of cool. I do like the new foci that come up.
Yeah, they added 5 new foci. This book actually has 5 new foci: battles the blaze, befriends the flames, controls the scene, finds what's lost, and shuts death's door. You want to pick one, and we'll just go over it.
Let's do controls the scene. I think that's a cool one.
All right, read the first ability.
So the first ability first of all, what controls this said, when an emergency happens, the team looks to you to make sure everything goes as smoothly as possible. You know how to keep everyone calm, motivated, wrangle the team and equipment, and take the 30-foot view of the situation. So the first tier ability, is it's an ability that I know called encouragement. It's tier 1, a tier 1 ability. Like I said, encouragement, like we see in the speaker ability.
Yeah, it is the speaker ability.
Right.
The second one is enable others. That's the one that you can actually give multiple characters benefit assets to roles. The third one, it gives you a choice between 2, like all the other. It's scene insight or team leader. Team leader is pretty cool. It costs 3 intellect points. When you work with a group of people who have a shared goal, such as putting out a fire, rescuing a victim, or so on, you project a confident, knowledgeable, and calming presence. Everyone on your team, including yourself, can see and hear you as you choose to reroll a single task for free. And you can use this ability again. You can't use this ability again until your next 10-hour rest. So you basically get a free reroll.
Right, which is nice. Don't have to spend an XP, just spend 3 intellect points. And if you're a...
No, you don't have to spend any. Oh yeah, you spend 3 intellect points.
Yeah.
But by tier 3, you should.
By tier 3, if you have an edge of 3, you could, or just depends on where you're putting your edges. But if you have an edge of 3 intellect, that's a free ability.
You know what's funny? Since these things are, I know this is not first responders, but the game GM in me, right? Since these things are tier 3, I could see making this an artifact for a superhero game.
Yeah.
And make this whole this whole focus artifact that gives you all, you tier up the artifact like you would like you would your character,
Yeah.
and you get all these abilities.
Yeah, you could do it. That would be good for a superhero game. It'd be good for a fantasy game
Yeah,
if you wanted to have a crazy artifact in the game. It's a great idea.
Overpowered or anything.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's a great idea.
Yeah,
And see, that's what I'm saying. This is one of the other beautiful things about Cypher. You're sitting here, we're going through this, and Anthony just comes up with that right in the spur of the moment. Not to say anybody else hasn't done it, but it's just how the system works. It just kind of gives you insights and ideas on how to do things, in of itself, and that just speaks volumes to this book.
and like every other, we always say that when we do the walkthroughs. I always feel a little let down if they don't add some new focus, foci to the scepter of leadership. That's perfect. If they don't add at least 2 or 3 foci to the book, because then that's like a missed opportunity in my eyes.
I agree.
So yeah, I think all 5 of these focus. Shut Death's Door is pretty cool too.
Oh yeah,
Basically you're healing. Tier 1, it does a quick heal. Tier 2 does you can move an impaired, or it's called You're Okay. You move an impaired or debilitated character 1 step up the damage track. That's actually really good for a horror game too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because you could just change that ability to inspire.
I really like this. It says alternatively, you can use this ability to help a character overcome special damage, like a broken leg, or administering oxygen for smoke inhalation, or dealing with poison. This is actually a really good.
Right, and think about it. Like we talked about, using it in a horror game, just flip it around a little bit. It helps you overcome trauma, overcome madness, or the taint. Cool little stuff, little just tweaks to it. Freaking great ability.
And triage for tier 3 is really good too. You're able to expertly discern who is most in need of medical assistance and quickly provide it. In a single action, you can heal up to 3 injured creatures who are close to you. The most injured gets 1d6 plus 2, the second to their might pool. The second regains 1d6 plus 1, and the third gets 1d6. That's crazy. So you essentially get 3d6 plus 3 on one action.
21 points. There's 21 points of healing.
That's awesome.
Up to 21 points of healing. Yeah, that's freaking crazy.
Yo, you can take Shut Death's Door as your cleric.
Right. Once again, another thing that I don't think people, look at close enough. You can use Shut Death's Door as your baseline idea behind your cleric. Their first 3 tiers done for you, just like that, which is great. Throw in some radiant abilities, so they can fight undead.
Yeah, if this is your focus, then you make sure. If this is your focus, you make sure you take add up as your type and get all your spells from that.
Right, exactly. Get your extra stuff from there. Exactly. So yeah, this is good. This is a real solid. Like I said, the whole thing is solid, and like you said, all 5 of those foci just work. Also,
Okay, dude.
I was just saying, also talking about character creation, the thing that I love too, something that MCG games are great and known for is the character connections. In this one, of course, they call it crew connections, because you built that roster and your crew, works together. So you get to build, they give you a way to randomly generate connections, or, just go ahead and pick what you need to connect yourself to the rest of the group. So I still love that particular feature.
Oh, Solo RPG guy brought up a good point too. You can use it in Tollus as your second foci, like when we were giving a race.
Yeah.
Second. Yeah, that's very true.
That's actually a great idea.
Yeah. Then it goes into the equipment section, and I really love this equipment section.
You like equipment.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for equipment because I get a lot of ideas from equipment sections, believe it or not. Like I'll get concepts from equipment sections.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I just think Cypher needed this. I think Cypher needed because we tend to run a lot of games based in modern times. So this just started out like the stuff that we were making up on the fly, but this just started it out for me. I don't have to bother. Like a Kevlar vest. You know what I mean? What you call it, a rain poncho. It even touches on.
Yeah.
But yeah, before we even do that though, it was broken out. The equipment section was broken out into 3 categories. They had protective gear, weapons, and proper equipment.
Right. The protective gear goes from complete mundaneness, where it's not really any armor protection like a rain poncho, all the way down to level 3 hazmat suits. It's pretty cool when you look at it through that lens. And like Anthony said, it can give you some ideas especially if you randomize it and just pick something randomly, and you're going to build a game based around that particular piece of protective gear or so on and so forth.
And I don't know if we talked about this, but essentially in this game, you fight the disasters. The big bad is the disaster, right? And they want to emphasize that. So that would change what would be a traditional weapon in an RPG to some, something that a firefighter would use, or So I love the fact that on the improvised weapon they have a wet blanket.
Right.
And it counts as a light weapon, because someone who, like if that would have happened on the spot in a non-first responder game, you have to think for a second. Like, how would I view a wet blanket? Well, this
right.
is
what am I going to do with it?
Weapon. It does 2 points. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And then they have the more traditional weapons. They have the weapons that a firefighter would use, like a fire extinguisher, a fireman's axe, a fire hose,
foam suppressant. Yeah.
I always like these weapon sections. I think MCG always does a great job of explaining what their thought process is and why these items are on this list. So, I just enjoy reading them.
Oh yeah, the equipment sections are always great, especially like you said, just especially thinking about something like first responders. If you randomize those charts and picked an item from each of those charts and built your adventure, hazmat suit, crowbar, and wet blanket, if you would, you can literally build your concept around that, and have just a series of interesting one shots. So
yeah. And then it goes into the normal equipment. Once again, this is not only useful for this game, this is useful for any of your Cypher games that you're running, you're using modern technology. They have waterproof lighters, safety glasses, what's in a modern day survival kit, what's in a modern day climbing kit. Like, not only does it add it into it tells you exactly what's in there. You know what I mean?
Right.
They stat out ambulances for you.
Yeah, I'm saying these words because Al said Sam.
Well, I am looking for first response. Oh, sorry about that. Chapter 3. You want to start going into chapter 3, Dean?
Yeah, so chapter 3 is running the game. That opens us up. Chapter 7 is GMing first responders games, and it goes into techniques, talks about the challenges and what goals you should set for yourself, running this particular thing. It also will go into telling you about, setting achievable goals versus the unachievable, or if you want to have multiple goals set up, contested encounters, challenges, and so on and so forth. It even talks about disaster mode, which is Another great mechanic.
I mean, here's where you get the unique mechanics to this book, right? It's gonna give you contested encounters, which is unique to this book. Disaster mode, which is unique to this book, and it introduces the concept of a challenge system.
Well, you got to remember too, and the crew.
Yeah.
You know, building your roster.
Do you want to go over one of the modes, or you want?
Yeah, let's well, of course we've talked about it. Let's take disaster mode. You know, similar to horror mode, this is where you want to ramp up the tension at that epic portion of the game, and it works very much like horror mode. Every time a GM intrusion is rolled, the intrusion range increases. You know, and just like horror mode, you can set it, you know, that you want it to be 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, or you can run it all the way to 1 to 20 if you want it. So that means even though the player could be succeeding at an action, you still get, you know, there's still an intrusion that can happen at anywhere, even with them succeeding, which is really, really cool.
I like contested encounter. Contested encounter is similar to like how you would have facing a villain, but this one is more of a instead of an individual creature, it's the scene that's the encounter, and you have to do multiple rolls in order to overcome the scene, right? So this could be anything from a flood, a crack in a dam that's starting to flood, or a fire in a room that could quickly spread to the entire house. And it's about you know, giving the player a certain amount of rolls with the difficulty increasing or decreasing depending on their actions on the previous rolls. It's really cool.
Yeah, think about those movies you watch where it's like you were talking about, like if there's a hurricane or there's a flood happening, those things, you know, the water, like I said, the water's slowly rising. You know, or the winds are getting stronger, it's shearing off pieces of the roof. It's going to eventually tear the roof off. Just great, gritty, you know, draw you in moments. That's the way I see this section.
This section also brings in the concept of crew members. That's essentially followers, if you know that from other MCG books. But you essentially, you have the opportunity to pick up level 2 NPCs that are good at a niche thing, and they'll help you out with specific things in the adventure. And you know, that's always, I always like adding NPCs that are not only helpful, but as a GM, it helps you to keep dialogue moving when the players are not communicating with each other. And especially with something like a natural disaster game where you might not have as many NPCs to dialogue with, they could dialogue with the other crew members to keep, you know, the RP going.
Right, exactly. So then we move on from there, and it talks about the disaster primer, which is kind of cool because what that is, you know, you kind of have the foreshadowing of what the great disaster or whatever is going to be, you know. Like fire, you know, it talks about fire being the most prominent of the 3 given, you know, it can.
Oh, hold on, Dean, before you let out, there's one other thing that we should talk about that I think is very important.
Go ahead.
It's treating damage is done a lot differently here, so is healing. So in that other section, they actually break down the different forms of healing you could do. It's not just I'm healing my member, you know, it's actually different styles of healing would do different, you know, like, so applying bandages it won't necessarily be effective to someone that's burning in a fire. So they actually have the different types of injuries and how long of an action it takes to heal those people. I think that's actually pretty cool, and it's unique to this game as well.
Right.
I'm sorry, Dana.
Oh, no, you're fine. I'm glad you caught it. We didn't talk about it, you know. So the disaster primer, what it was kind of cool about it is that it kind of gives you the idea that the disaster is an entity versus a set piece. It's not, like prime example, when they talk about fire, fire is the most prominent of the three, given that it has a life of its own. It can spread far and wide if not fought. Fires can be caused by storms, accidents, volcanoes, flood, arson, and more. But that sentence, if they are not fought. So there's built into the game how to use fire as a entity versus just a, just a fire. It's not just there are things you have to overcome, and the same thing goes for like floods and then the unstable structures. They literally give you a way to turn this into a respondable and it's an NPC. Is literally what it is.
I would think that this is the core of this game, really, is that the scenarios are what the conflict is. It's not necessarily, you're not necessarily fighting other individuals or creatures. You're fighting what the scenario is, right? And in order for you as a GM to add a mechanical element to it, in order for you to be able to, justify your actions and damage taking, they basically made it so they turned the scene into the big bad, which is ingenious to me. And I haven't got to actually run this, but I really want to try this out. And this will port over into any other Cypher game, which is awesome.
What's really cool is, again, they give you lots of things to look at, a lot of reference material, for you to get the feel of how you might want to run your game versus with the books and TV shows and so on and so forth. And they even have like a quote from, a really famous movie about fire. And the quote in the book says, "Fire is a living thing. It breathes, it eats, and it hates. The only way to beat it is to think like it." When you take a quote like that, and if you internalize it and then use it as the basis of an RPG, that's really cool, because like we said, now it's not, a person, it's not a place or a thing. It is literally, this element, this, power that is the antagonist.
And the way it's done, instead of the scene or we'll use fire as an example because it's the one Dean's talking about currently, but instead of a hit point, it has a threat level, a threat number. And that's essentially once you bring that threat to zero, then it's no
Then
longer.
you won.
So it'd be the equivalent, like to explain it in layman's terms, it'd be the equivalent of if this fire had hit points, that's essentially what it would be.
Good.
But they stat out not only fires, they stat out many different threat levels.
Well, yeah, like I said, they go through water,
earthquakes.
yeah, unstable structures, and it breaks it down where you can turn all of these things, and even more so gives you the guidance, like if there's something that's not listed, like you want to do a fission. Fission, somebody at a research facility, a fission engine is going to explode, something like that, or fusion or whatever. That's the kind of stuff that, this allows you to do.
And not only does it breaks it down into so many different threat levels, but within the same threat level itself, like if we use flood as an example, they're gonna stat out a simple flood for you, a standard flood, a demanding flood. And it'll go all the way down to what was that movie when they were on the island and the whole island gets covered in water?
Oh yeah, I know the one you're talking about, the tsunami.
Yeah, it goes all the way down to an intimidating flood, a challenging flood, and they do that for every threat level. So they'll show you, here's an easy one, and here's the worst of the worst. You're not gonna escape this. And right. I really love the building collapses, the unstable structure.
Right.
Those are really cool.
And I like like you said, we're talking about all of it. We're talking about the different things, like with fire, they even give you classifications for the fire, different, wood, oil, gas, electrical, you know, flammable metals, and so on and so forth, which, you know, is so cool. And like you said, you know, they'll give you the same thing with the fires, simple fires and standard fire and so on and so forth. It's crazy, you know, because you got to get up to, what is it? The final one is intimidating fire,
Yeah.
you know, so that's like, you know,
That's a towering inferno.
yeah, you know, that's just, it's really cool. Like I said, they give you, like you said, we were saying, you get everything you need for all types of disasters.
The next chapter itself is the setting, right? And it breaks down, you essentially, if you're playing in the setting world, the concept of this game basically is everyone, like, to put it in simple terms, right? Everyone plays in this agency. It's called SAVER, SAVER, and it's an agency of like world first responders, and it's short for Sovereign Agency of Veteran Emergency Responders. And you're essentially like the GI Joe. You'll go save disasters all around the world, right? And you, like, if we was doing a quick game right now, Dean will have 3 characters, Al will have 3 characters, Mike from chat, Jason from chat will have 3 characters, and me as a GM, I'll do my intro scene, and I'll say, your guys are flying into an island on Tahiti that's about to get hit with a tsunami. And then all 4 of them will pick what character they think best suits this disaster emergency. They all members of the SAVER agency, and then we'll start the game from there. Which is really cool. This is like excellent for one shots.
Well, you know,
okay, Dave.
I was just saying, Jason in the chat he just put it like we could borrow another idea from Blaze in the Dark using the disaster progress clock, which is really cool because it kind of talks about that, where we were talking about that for challenges. Challenges are kind of
the challenge system is essentially a disaster.
That's what I was saying. As I said, the challenge system is basically a progress clock. So it's really cool that you would put that together, and you know, it's actually already kind of built in.
Dean, you want to talk anything about the setting?
The setting itself, again, like Anthony was saying, you know, it's a setting where it's a real world, but there's like an international response group that handles disasters across the world. You could run this as a campaign in of itself. Personally, the way I like it is to add it into an existing campaign, whether I add it into my supers campaign or a modern day, you know, urban fantasy campaign. You know, I see it as an addition more so, because I don't think I would want to just run first responders and be done.
I mean, actually, you could. My initial thought was you couldn't. To when we read this for the. Actually, that's a lie, because I was the one who suggested we do this, because I've been reading this for the last 2 or 3 days. But they give you, this section is actually really cool. They give you all the principal characters, and they stat out all the main characters of this SAVER agency. So you can run an adventure based on just this group.
Oh yeah.
Right? It has all the things saved out. It breaks down what what the dispatcher's responsibilities, what a field office is. It gives you a ton of great information, right? It also gives you various disaster scenarios and compare them to different settings. So it's like what Dean said, it gives you the sci-fi version. If you wanted to run first responders in sci-fi, first responders in horror, first responders in fantasy, it gives you the ideas of how to do these same scenarios in those 3 genres in particular. So this whole section is chock full of great information.
Oh, absolutely. You know, agree 1000%. You know, like I said, it's you know, that was just a personal thing for me. I never said it couldn't be done or shouldn't be done. I just said I wouldn't want to do it that way. Like we were just saying, like Andrew was saying, because it can be plugged into all of the different settings, I would love plugging it in to something else. You know, you know, there's a lot of ideas that just run through my head when we start talking about what this setting is all about and what can be done with it. So
Yeah, the settings section isn't extensive, but it doesn't really have to be because the scenario section is gonna make up for this. What it essentially does, it gives you all the key players in this agency, and you can either choose to play members of this agency or take all the characters that they give you and insert them into whatever agency you want to do yourself. But chapter 10 is actually phenomenal because chapter 10 gives you 10 fully fleshed out characters. I mean, fully fleshed out. It's like going to a con and getting pre-gens. So we could literally run this right after this game. We'll pull a pre-gen from the book and we'll start playing.
yeah. And that's kind of huge too, because like Anthony was saying, of course they do give you the pre-gens, or you could even turn those pre-gens into heads of the departments.
Yeah.
Which is another cool thing about it, the way it's set up. So
But the reason why I really like it is because they super stat it out, so you don't have to do anything. You know what I mean?
right.
We can just grab these guys and go. You can use them as NPCs or you can use them as characters.
And then we move on to chapter 11, which is the subtle cipher section, which is cool. They added in some new subtle ciphers, which I think are pretty damn nice.
Yeah, they added in 6 total new subtle ciphers.
Yeah, 6 of them total. But I think they're all pretty nice, like just for example, gut feeling, sometimes instinct, subtle environment clue, or half remembered incident provides the user new information that is helpful in the decision they're making. Effectively, the GM provides the user with insight, but the PC doesn't pay any XP for the benefit. So insight is one of those abilities that's really cool because you get to ask the GM, I think, 2 questions and they have to answer. Which is really nice, so you got a gut feeling, oh man, this just doesn't feel right. Can you tell me what's going on here, GM?
Yeah, all these subtle ciphers are great for any game, to be honest.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, these are all grade A ciphers. I would use these in any game. Matter of fact, yeah, these could easily be in Stay Alive. These could easily be in Toeless. These are all great ciphers.
Yeah, the ciphers are awesome, and you can actually, and the thing about subtle ciphers, you can always make them manifest and vice versa. Just have to be creative.
And here's where this book really shines, unlike a lot of the other setting books, is the other setting books give you adventures, right? Or give you scenarios, but they truly don't play out like scenarios. They play out like an adventure. You got to read it, figure. These scenarios are literally what they are. They drop right into the actual action scene. So you could take this, maybe skim through it and immediately start playing if you really wanted to. Because the setup is less than a page long. It gives you the full out maps. The first one's a massive fire. This,
And the thing about it is, it doesn't just stop with just plain old fire. They give you all kinds, wildfire, chemical fire, chemical fire at a plant. Then there's what,
volcanoes, flood,
yeah, volcanoes and so on.
nuclear
Skyscraper on a fire, building tenement, so on and so forth.
And the last one that I'm really interested in is pandemics. Because there's a lot of interesting ideas outside of first responders that you could incorporate these scenes in. I always love the fantasy, the trope of, the Black Plague, or, like just playing around with that idea that you could easily incorporate this into Toeless, into Godforsaken, Gods of the Fall.
Right. And the thing about, and the cool part about it too, is what you're saying by incorporating these things, these are truly the You know, this is one you were talking about that, you know, Stay Alive. You know, you could do the vampire apocalypse or the zombie plague. You know, using pandemic as its baseline. You know, which is it's just great that this is kind of built into a game.
And just to go touch back on these scenarios, right? Each scenario is what,
Somewhere around,
somewhere
anywhere-
around 3 pages long.
well,
With-
the shortest one is earthquakes, and that's like 10 pages, 11 pages. Nuclear disaster is about 7 pages. So 7 pages might be the shortest one. But, you know, fires take up almost 20 pages.
Yeah, but they 20 pages that are broken down into different types. So
Right.
it's not a one, it can be one continuous adventure, or it could just be the scene that you.
But that's what I'm saying. It breaks it down into when I say 20, almost 20 pages on fire, that means they're gonna go from, you know, all the different type of fires or something, like a wildfire versus a skyscraper on fire versus, you know, a plant, you know, a chemical plant being on fire. So it goes through fire at all those levels, and then it moves right into volcanoes, like I said, which is another 10 pages. Floods are, you know, 10 pages, 14 pages, where because it talks about how different types of disasters can take place within that category. So it's really well thought out.
Jason C and chat, well, I need to stop picking and choosing what I back. I'm assuming he means the Kickstarters. I think personally, once they came out with the revised Cypher edition, right? Every setting book they came out with since has that toolkit mentality that they assume that, hey, you got this setting, but we're gonna try to make it as compatible and interesting for every other setting as we possibly can in this book to make you want to use it for other games.
Yeah, when they announced first responders during the Claim the
First
Sky,
Responders came on Claim the Sky anyway.
right? That's what I'm saying. When they first announced this, you know, immediately I started having dreams of damage control from Marvel Comics.
Yeah.
You know, within my superhero setting. And, you know, of course, the origin was mentioned, and it just melded all together. I wanted damage control to be born out of, you know, the opening forays into the superheroes from origin, you know, only to eventually progress the game into a full-blown boundless type campaign. And that was something like, you know, you're talking about, you know, stop picking and choosing. And I think that's why me and Ant just kind of back everything so we can have everything, because you never know what kind of hidden gem you're going to get with an MCG product.
Yeah, like even just going through these scenarios, like it's funny because every scenario I say, but like, oh, this is cool to run like this. But how about if I ran this in this?
Right.
Like I'm using the chemical plant thing, right? And I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to this chemical plant is the zombie apocalypse? You know what I mean? And you have a chemical plant and hordes of zombies at the same time.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. I was just thinking about some of the adventures we've run, like your God, not God doesn't love us anymore. Yeah. The one that you said on the
Intrepid.
The one you said on the Intrepid. You know, just imagine, you know, throwing the pandemic rules into it, you know, or you know what I'm saying, into that particular adventure, and reshape it a little bit into the pandemic versus just the zombie horror one shot. You know, that would be like really, really cool.
I know somebody in chat mentioned volcano. I'm actually working on a one shot now using this volcano scene. It's not verbatim because it isn't a first responders team, but I am actually using all the stats from this one of these volcano scenes.
That would be actually awesome. Solar RPG guy says, first play a supers game that heroes stop the bad guy who has probably caused the disaster. then play the responders coming in after the fact.
Yeah, that's
we
awesome
could,
too.
we could do that. You want to combine your volcano game, Anthony? I'll do the superhero portion.
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah, this book is just chock full of information, man. Like while you were talking, I'm just like zooming through.
Yeah.
But like the scene, all the scene stuff, even if you're not planning to run it verbatim, there's just so much stuff to mind here.
Well, I mean, and I think that's one of the things I think sometimes people miss about Cypher System. There's so much there for you to mind, but it's built like that. It's supposed to inspire you. It's supposed to, give you all the tidbits and tools to tell this story how you want to tell it. And I think, once you embrace that concept when it comes to Cypher System, you will start to look at the books in an entirely different light.
And Dean, I think I messed up earlier. The back page, like after the scenes, then you get the lingo, the glossary, basically tells you all the emergency terminology.
Yeah.
But in page 134 is where they have the pre-gens at.
The sample characters are 134.
Fully fleshed out characters. Check that out. They have 10 fully fleshed out characters on page 134. You literally could pick up this book and everyone will be playing within minutes.
And it's 136 in the PDF, guys.
Yeah, 136 in the PDF, 134 in the physical book. But if you go there, like if we go there now,
let's just look at firefighter. I was looking at them. So how about incident commander, which is cool, which is on page 138 of the PDF, 136 of the so incident commander is, it says, incident commander is a sharp-eyed responder, who controls the scene, which is, they change, of course, responder to incident commander. So you're a sharp-eyed incident commander. But like Anthony was saying, they statted out, you got your 10, 10, 14 for might, speed, intellect, effort of 1, intellect edge of 1, full set of skills, persuasion, inspiration, planning, perception, initiative, and healing. A list of your special abilities, your flex skill, here to help, find the flaw, encouragement, and safety officer, weapons, gives you background notes, completely fleshed out character, which is awesome.
Yep, you jump right in and start playing. That is freaking awesome.
and the other thing you can do too, you can just, have these, I would actually have them printed up and probably laminate them and just have all of these always ready on hand, because even if you had somebody who wanted to make a character, you could give them as an example so they could see how it unfolds, which also is a huge help. And of course, like I said, you got them laminated, sitting on the table, person can play a character or they can build a character based on that.
Yeah, I might just advertise a one-shot this week of first responders. Just pick one of the random scenarios, have these pre-gens and go, let's rock and roll, let's just play.
Works. That definitely works.
And the character sheet, there's a little bit more to keep track of if we're playing the straight first responders. So they have like an adjustment to the character sheet on page 142, which is also pretty cool. Like some additional info that you could add on in addition to a character sheet.
Yeah.
Because it has remember we spoke about how they have the verbiage and how those words actually do stuff. And you could have your crew ahead of time. You could, everybody has 2 or 3 characters. You could have your 2 or 3 characters. And you could, if you're running a campaign, every time you do you have 3 characters, right? And if you constantly switching between them, they might be different tiers. So you could tier up your characters, and have the level differences. Like, oh, my firefighter is tier 2, but my paramedic is tier 3. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Which is pretty cool. And then, and then of course it's the index, like the regular. So what's your overall opinion of this?
Overall, my opinion is that this is one great book. I'm happy to have it. I really cannot wait to get to use it. If you do the one shot, and see, that's what I'm saying. We could combine the two one shots, just see if people, let's talk about it. But either you do the disaster, and that disaster could, have to bring in the superheroes, or vice versa.
Mhm.
You
I mean, we could definitely talk about that, but your overall opinion of the first responders.
My overall opinion is that it's a great book. Buy it. If you don't have it, put it on your shelf. Get the PDF, read it on your tablet. Whatever is your method. Whatever floats your boat. But put this book in your library of MCG stuff.
Yeah, I personally think that it was. I enjoyed it a lot more the second read. I think the first read I probably wasn't. The first time I got it from the Kickstarter, I wasn't given the actual setting and the mechanics of, like the way they made disasters into full-fledged like obstacles with mechanics attached to it. I didn't give it justice. So the second read I appreciate it even more now the second time that I'm reading it, opposed to the first.
Absolutely.
I actually, the first time I read it, I wanted to just gut it for ideas. Now I want to actually run it as is and see how it plays out. Because I think it's going to be really enjoyable.
Yeah, well, that's the cool part about it. What we were saying too, as far as when you look at it through that lens, you can literally, like we were talking about, I'm talking to you about plugging it into another, another, system game, so to speak. But it's it can still, both games can still connect to each other, but still feel wholly separate. And like you said, running it as is, because guess what? The superhuman element gets totally taken out of the disaster scene, and then the first responders, but you could have a nice scene where, they look up and see, this world Superman flying away or whatever, and you can see, have the superhero in my game. I could have a superhero look down and go, I'm glad to have Cypher on, that one scene, glad to have Cypher out there, helping us clean up the mess, or whatever. Cool stuff like that.
I mean, at the end of the day, First Responders is a great product. Run it as is, or run it in any other scenario. It's the perfect toolkit book. It adds all those modern elements. It adds the ability to take a disaster, or not even if you don't view it in disaster terms, it adds the ability to add mechanics to a scene to create threat without having to be attacking another physical person, which is awesome. I love the equipment section. I wholeheartedly recommend First Responders. I think play it as the game or use it as a toolkit. Either way, it's going to work for you.
Exactly. Agree 1000%.
If you like us and you like what we do, follow the Cypher Unlimited Discord server. We have largest family on Discord server for all things Money Cook games. We have 4,000 members and growing. But if Discord's not for you, join our Facebook group. We not as big as our Discord, but great conversations being had there as well. If you find it in the kindness of your heart, give us a subscribe here on Twitch, or follow us on Twitch, or like, share, and subscribe our videos on YouTube. We really appreciate it. We're currently only 49 subs away from 1,000 on YouTube. So please, 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 whether you love us or hate us, go over there and sub. Or visit our online store, pick up some cool Cypher Unlimited merch like the shirt D got on or the hat I got on. Or give us a little donation on Ko-fi. Our videos are always free, but it helps us out with little things like Zoom costs. Last but not least, we love you guys.
We love you guys.
And from us at the
Al, you
CU,
jumping in?
we will see you later.